Week 9 of World Religions explores Judaism, the oldest of the Abrahamic religions, and an outgrowth of ancient Israelite religion. So, Judaism has a connection with a particular nation and with land claims to an extent that is far more pronounced than in most of the world's religions. This also opens up controversy, given the conflict that is in process at the moment between the State of Israel and the Palestinian people. The question of land claims is very prominent. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that not all Jewish people are supportive of the actions of the State of Israel or any particular regime in the State of Israel or any particular leader, any more than US citizens and residents are all necessarily supportive of the administration in the US. A great many Jewish people, in the sense of practicing religious Jews and ethnic Jews, have protested vehemently in favor of the rights of Palestinian people and faced arrest in this country and throughout the world. So that diversity of thought is very important to acknowledge in relation to Jewish people. And they support the Gazan people not despite being Jews, but because they are Jews, believing that this is what their faith mandates them to do, and resenting a relationship between what they would regard as oppressive and unjust behavior and their faith. Not in my name, as it were, is the tone of much of what they would do and say. Nonetheless, we should acknowledge that land claims play an important part in the Hebrew Bible and in ancient Israelite religion and then Judaism. In the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Genesis, there is the account of God's covenant with Abraham, and God promises Abraham land, among other things. And the motif of the promised land is to the forefront in the Hebrew Bible. When the people of Israel, the Hebrews, as they're called at this point, escape slavery in Egypt and travel for 40 years in the Sinai desert, they eventually reach the promised land, the land of Canaan. And there are Canaanite people on the land. The Bible offers two accounts as to how the people of Israel, the Hebrews, gained possession of the promised land. The book of Joshua presents a quite violent picture, perhaps typified by the story of the destruction of the city of Jericho, where the armies of Israel surround the city and God helps them knock down the walls and they rush in and slaughter all the Canaanites. However, the book of Judges offers a very different account of the takeover, a more cultural and subtle takeover, whereby the people of Israel marry into the Canaanite people who are already on the land, but insist that their Canaanite wives adopt the religion of Israel, that they do not worship foreign gods. Well, there would be no foreign wives or foreign gods if they had slaughtered all of the Canaanite people. So that may be an account of military propaganda. Arguably, at times the Hebrew Bible will make Israel out to be a more mighty military force than it is likely to have been historically, which means there may have been less bloodshed, and that arguably is supported by the archaeological evidence as well. Still, the idea of promised land is still there in the Hebrew Bible, the idea that God would earmark a piece of land for a particular people. A great question and a burning question is the relationship between the Bible's land claims and the creation of the State of Israel. The State of Israel, of course, is created after the Ottoman Empire falls and the British rule Palestine, and then at the end of the Second World War, the United Nations bequeaths Palestine to become the State of Israel. This is in the aftermath, of course, of the Holocaust, the atrocity of the Holocaust and the wider persecution of Jewish people. Because of this persecution of Jewish people in Europe, since the beginning of the 20th century, Jewish people flocked to Israel. They'd been largely absent before that. There was only a minute Jewish population around the turn of the century. Most of the people living in the land we call Israel now would have been Arab people, and they would have been Muslims, with a smaller Christian population. But with the persecution of the Jewish people in Europe, the Jewish population swelled in Israel, and the modern state of Israel was created in 1948. But to what extent is this the same promised land referenced throughout the Hebrew Bible? It's a difficult question to address fairly. And then there's the relationship between Zionism and Judaism. Zionism is a belief that the Jewish people must have possession of the land of Israel. And even that takes various forms, ranging from a very literal political Zionism that says, yes, they just must have political control of the land, to more cultural and spiritual forms of Zionism that aren't so fixed on physical tracts of land so much as the Jewish people must have the promised land in the sense of identity, or something other than a geographical sense of land. So Zionism itself takes various different forms, but the discussion post will ask about the relationship between Judaism, land claims, and Zionism. Now, it might be fair to say that while land claims do play an integral role in Judaism, Zionism is not an exclusively Jewish movement. Some of the most adamant Zionists are fundamentalist Christians, and they are in the US. They believe that unless the Jewish people have control of the land of Israel, the second coming of Christ cannot occur. So they're hence anxious to ensure the Jewish people have complete control of the land. However, I think there's a question as to whether this is about a concern for the Jewish people or merely a precondition for the second coming of Christ. And ironically, one would have to ask what such fundamentalist Christians think will happen to Jewish people upon the second coming of Christ. Will they even necessarily be saved according to that belief system? Perhaps not. So I'd urge you, as you view this week's materials and do the reading, to do so obviously academically, and obviously with academic freedom of speech and freedom of thought, but also bearing in mind the kind of responsibility we all face in the study of religion, especially around Judaism, because the evils of anti-Semitism and the evils of Islamophobia and unfair prejudice against the people of Gaza all come into play, don't they? And it's not a case of if one criticizes Israel or if one asserts the rights of the people of Gaza, that is anti-Semitic. That might be unfair to say, although maybe the possibility of anti-Semitism does lurk there equally well. There could be a kind of Islamophobia if there are sweeping condemnations and huge assumptions made about the people of Gaza. And of course, on top of that, the people of Gaza are not all Muslim people. They include some Palestinian Jews. That population does still exist, albeit very small in number. And there are Palestinian Christians, some of them belonging to the Eastern Catholic churches, like the Melkite Church, although there are Roman Catholic Palestinians too. And that community is small, but it exists too. So this conflict in Israel and Gaza is by no means simply Jews versus Muslims. That would be a distortion. Also, it might be a distortion to say it's about religion, and it might be a distortion to say it's about the land claims of the Bible or of Judaism. A moral question that comes into play is whether there's a tendency to respond to one injustice by perpetrating another injustice, in the sense that the Bible narrates conquests and takeovers and occupations and kind of mass abductions of the people of Israel, later called Jews, and then the modern history of Europe witnesses to atrocities against Jewish people. Does this somehow then lead to other atrocities that by no means fix any problem or represent a kind of reparation for the previous evils? It's almost more like evil spawning yet another atrocity. Feel free to address that question if you want to in your discussion post. And I think we can do this by being very respectful of the Jewish faith, respectful of Israel and the diversity of thought among Israelis and among Jews, and also being realistic about the land claims of Judaism. This is definitely one of the most hot-button topics, I think it's fair to say, in the world religions course, and one where in some ways most is at stake, um, partly because of the way religion is portrayed in the conflict. Um, Maybe the last comment I should make is that the core beliefs of Judaism and the core beliefs of Islam and the core beliefs of Christianity deplore. Um, they deplore genocide, they deplore man-made famine, they deplore abducting people and keeping them hostage and torturing them. All of that's deplored. There is no sense in which any religion is supporting any of that violence. But that said, um, your thoughts are very valuable on this. There's a great need for rational, well-informed discussion about the conflicts in the Middle East and about the role of religion in those conflicts. So please make your contribution. Thank you.